The lunch rush hit the restaurant like a wave that never quite broke. Plates stacked up faster than they could be cleared, voices overlapped into a constant low roar, and the air smelled like grease, lemon cleaner, and impatience. It was the kind of chaos that management liked to call efficient, even though everyone working the floor knew it meant something else entirely. It meant mistakes would happen. It meant tempers would flare. And it meant someone would get blamed. She was already moving as fast as she could. Her name was Maya, though most customers didn't know that. To them, she was just the quiet waitress with her hair tied back too tight, sleeves rolled up past her elbows, sneakers scuffed from months of sliding across the same tiles. She had been on her feet since before sunrise, and her legs burned in a way that no amount of smiling could hide. Still, she wiped tables carefully, the way she always did, even when her hands shook from exhaustion. A half-cleared booth near the center of the restaurant caught her attention. A family had just left, crumbs scattered across the vinyl seat, ketchup smeared along the edge of the table. She grabbed a rag, sprayed cleaner, and leaned in. That was when the voice cut through the noise. Clean faster. It wasn't loud at first. It didn't need to be. The tone alone carried across the room like a blade sliding out of its sheath. Sure. Commanding. Certain of obedience. Maya froze for half a second, just long enough for a few nearby customers to glance up. She straightened, already knowing who it was before she turned around. The manager stood a few steps away, arms crossed, lips pressed into a thin line of irritation. He was dressed in a crisp button-down shirt that never seemed to wrinkle, his name badge pinned perfectly straight. He didn't look angry. He looked inconvenienced, like her presence itself was slowing down his day. "I said clean faster," he repeated louder this time. "We're not paying you to daydream." A couple at the counter exchanged an uncomfortable look. Someone cleared their throat. A fork clinked against a plate and then went still. Maya nodded immediately. She always did. "Yes," she said softly, barely audible over the noise of the restaurant. But the nod wasn't enough. The manager stepped closer, eyes flicking to the table she was cleaning, then to the long line at the register. His jaw tightened, not with rage but with something colder. "Control. You're behind," he said. "Again. Do you know how this looks?" She swallowed. "I'm trying." He cut her off with a sharp laugh. "Trying isn't a skill. Speed is." He gestured at the rag in her hand. "If you can't handle basic cleaning, maybe you shouldn't be on the floor at all." A hush settled over the nearest tables. Not complete silence, but the kind that made every word sharper, heavier. The kind where people pretended to focus on their meals while listening to every syllable. Maya's cheeks burned. She could feel it, the heat rising up her neck, threatening to betray her. She forced herself to keep her eyes down. "I'll finish right now," she said. The manager scoffed. "You should have finished 5 minutes ago." Then louder for everyone to hear, "This isn't charity. Clean faster or clock out." The words hung there, ugly and undeniable. Maya bent back over the table, her movements suddenly stiff. She wiped harder, faster, the rag squeaking against the surface. Her heart pounded, but her face stayed blank, almost serene. Anyone watching closely might have noticed something strange in that moment. Not fear, not anger, but calculation. Because while the manager talked, while he performed his authority for the room, Maya's phone sat tucked into the front pocket of her apron, angled just enough that the camera lens peeked out through the fabric. The screen was dark. Silent. Recording. The manager turned away with a satisfied huff, already scanning the room for his next target. To him the moment was over. Another correction. Another reminder of who held power. To Maya it was another entry in a long invisible list. She finished the table in record time, wiped the seats, swept the crumbs into her hand, and moved on without a word. No eye contact. No apology beyond what she'd already given. The customers slowly returned to their conversations, the tension dissolving as quickly as it had formed. But something had shifted. At the beverage station, another server leaned toward her as she passed. "You okay?" the woman whispered, eyes darting toward the manager's back. Maya nodded again. "I'm fine." It was always the same answer. She wasn't fine. She hadn't been fine for a long time. But she had learned that explaining never helped. Complaining never changed anything. And reacting only made things worse. So instead she documented. Every shift, she arrived 10 minutes early, tied her apron, slipped her phone into the same pocket and adjusted it just enough. She didn't record everything. Only moments like this. Moments where voices sharpened. Where rules bent. Where lines were crossed so casually that no one thought to look for a record. The manager returned a few minutes later, clipboard in hand, scanning her section. "You missed a spot," he said, pointing at a chair leg. Maya crouched immediately, wiping it down. "Unbelievable," he muttered. "I shouldn't have to babysit." This time no one looked away. A man at a nearby table frowned openly. A woman shook her head just slightly as if in disbelief. The manager noticed. He straightened, smoothed his shirt and lowered his voice. "Don't make me repeat myself," he said. "You're replaceable." That word hit harder than the rest. Replaceable. Maya felt it land somewhere deep in her chest, an old bruise pressed again. She stood, nodded once more and went back to work. What the manager didn't know, what he had never bothered to ask, was why she never argued back. Why she never cried in the storage room like the others sometimes did. Why she stayed so quiet even when the humiliation was public. It wasn't because she believed him. It was because she was waiting. By the end of the rush, her section was spotless. Tables gleamed. Floors shone. Orders went out without delay. Still, the manager found reasons to hover, to comment, to remind her of her place. "Smile more," he said as she passed. "Pick up the pace," he snapped near the kitchen. "Don't forget who signs your paycheck," he added, almost casually. Each remark slid neatly into the growing archive on her phone. When the rush finally died down, Maya slipped into the back hallway to refill napkins. The noise of the restaurant faded behind the swinging door, replaced by the low hum of the refrigerator units. She leaned against the wall for just a second, eyes closed, breathing in. Then she reached into her apron and tapped her phone screen. The recording stopped. She checked the file name, the timestamp, the audio levels. Everything was clear. His voice, crisp and unmistakable. Her own replies quiet but present. The background noise enough to place the location without drowning out the words. She saved the file and slid the phone back into her pocket. Out front, the manager laughed with a regular customer, his posture relaxed, his tone warm. To anyone watching, he looked like a hard-working supervisor keeping things running smoothly. No one would have guessed that, less than an hour later, the same footage would be reviewed again and again by people who didn't work for him. People who didn't answer to him. People who asked questions he couldn't brush aside. For now, though, Maya stepped back onto the floor and picked up another rag. The manager glanced at her once more, satisfied, and turned away. He thought the moment was over. He thought he had won. And he had no idea that the camera he never noticed had just captured the sentence that would cost him everything. By the time the afternoon lull settled over the restaurant, the manager had already forgotten the words he'd barked at Maya during the lunch rush. To him, they were nothing more than routine corrections, the kind of sharp reminders he believed kept people productive. He moved through the dining room with the relaxed confidence of someone who had never been challenged, greeting regulars by name, joking with the kitchen staff, tapping his clipboard like a badge of authority. Maya noticed everything. She noticed how his tone shifted depending on who he spoke to. How his voice softened when addressing customers but hardened instantly when he turned to staff. How he smiled while criticizing, as if humiliation were a favor he was doing for them. She noticed which cameras in the restaurant were real and which were broken. Which corners of the floor were always just out of view. Which complaints never made it past the front desk. And she noticed how none of it ever changed. The afternoon passed slowly. Fewer tables. Fewer orders. Less noise to hide behind. In quiet moments like these, his behavior became more deliberate, almost intimate in its cruelty. He corrected posture. He commented on pacing. He hovered. "You missed a straw," he said at one point, tapping the edge of a table she had already cleaned twice. "I'll get it," Maya replied. He leaned closer than necessary. "You should already have gotten it." She nodded. The silence stretched between them, thick and uncomfortable. He waited, clearly expecting more, an apology maybe or an explanation he could dismiss. When it didn't come, his eyes narrowed. "Do you hear me?" he asked. "Yes," she said calmly. That was another thing he didn't like. The calm. It deprived him of the reaction he wanted. So he pressed harder. "I don't think you understand how lucky you are to work here," he continued. "People would kill for this job." Maya knew that wasn't true. Turnover was constant. Faces came and went so quickly she sometimes forgot names before learning them. But she also knew arguing facts never helped. "I understand," she said. He smirked. "Good." He walked away, clearly satisfied, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than the noise of the lunch rush had earlier. Maya returned to folding napkins, her hands steady, her breathing even. This wasn't new. It was just louder today. The first time he had spoken to her like that, she had assumed it was a bad day. Everyone had them. The second time, she wondered if she had done something wrong. The third time, she realized it didn't matter. By the 10th, she understood the pattern. He didn't humiliate her because she was slow. He humiliated her because she was quiet. Quiet people were easy. Quiet people didn't fight back. Quiet people absorbed pressure without cracking, which made them perfect containers for someone else's frustration. And for a while, Maya had let him believe that was all she was. She had taken the job out of necessity. Bills didn't wait for dignity. Rent didn't care about self-respect. She worked mornings and nights, covered shifts for coworkers who burned out or quit, smiled through comments that chipped away at her patience. What he didn't know was that every shift she stayed made her more certain, not weaker. Because Maya had already tried the proper channels. Weeks earlier, after one particularly bad night where he'd forced her to stay late without clocking the extra time, she had called the corporate hotline listed in the employee handbook. She remembered sitting on her bed, phone pressed to her ear, listening to automated messages loop over and over before finally reaching a polite voice that asked her to explain the issue. She had explained, carefully, calmly, with dates. The response had been sympathetic, professional, empty. "We'll look into it," they had said. Nothing happened. She had emailed HR next, included details, avoided emotional language, attached nothing because she had nothing concrete yet. 2 weeks passed without a reply. When she followed up, she received a generic response thanking her for her patience and reminding her that the company valued a respectful workplace. The manager's behavior worsened shortly after. It wasn't obvious enough to trace directly. No written warning. No open retaliation. Just smaller sections. Worse shifts. Less flexibility. The kind of punishment that left no fingerprints. That was when Maya stopped asking for help. Instead, she started preparing. The phone recordings weren't dramatic at first. Just tone. Just words. But patterns emerged quickly. Phrases repeated. Threats disguised as jokes. Instructions that contradicted policy, delivered verbally so there would be no paper trail. He told her to clock out early, then asked her to keep cleaning. He took a portion of pooled tips, claiming mistakes. He berated staff loudly for errors that management had caused. Each incident alone could be dismissed. Together they formed something else. Maya understood that instinctively. The manager, meanwhile, grew more comfortable. With each passing week, his comments became sharper, his patience thinner. He no longer bothered lowering his voice. He corrected her in front of customers without hesitation, as if daring someone to challenge him. One afternoon, he snapped at her for walking too slowly to the register. A customer waiting to pay frowned. "She's doing fine," the man said, half joking. The manager laughed it off. "We just like to keep standards high." But his eyes flicked to Maya, warning and calculating. Later that day, as she refilled condiments near the kitchen, another server pulled her aside. "Be careful," the woman whispered. "He's been watching you." Maya looked up. "Watching me?" The server nodded. "He asked if you were looking for another job. Said you seemed distracted." Maya felt a brief spike of unease, quickly smoothed over by resolve. "I'm fine," she said. The words came easily now. Too easily. The truth was she had noticed his attention shifting. He lingered longer near her section. Asked pointed questions about her availability. Made comments about loyalty and gratitude. "You don't talk much about yourself," he said once, leaning against the counter. "Hard to know where you stand." "I'm here to work," she replied. He smiled thinly. "That's not always enough." What he didn't realize was that Maya's silence wasn't emptiness. It was discipline. She had learned long ago how dangerous it could be to reveal too much to the wrong person. How information once given could be turned against you. So she revealed nothing. She worked. She recorded. She waited. On the surface, nothing changed. The restaurant kept running. Customers came and went. The manager kept barking orders. The staff kept their heads down. Underneath, the weight of it all pressed harder each day. There were moments when Maya felt it crack through her composure. Late nights when exhaustion blurred into anger. Mornings when she sat in her car before a shift, hands gripping the steering wheel, wondering how long she could keep this up. But then she would think about the recordings. About the growing archive on her phone. About the difference between complaining and proving. And she would walk back inside. One evening, near closing time, the manager cornered her near the dish station. "You're slower at night," he said. "Ever noticed that?" "I'm tired," she replied before she could stop herself. His eyebrows lifted, amused. "Tired?" he echoed. "You work a few shifts a week. Try managing a place like this." Maya bit her tongue. She could feel the familiar burn behind her eyes, the warning sign that emotion was rising. She focused on the sound of water running, the clatter of dishes, grounding herself. "I'll work faster," she said. He leaned closer. "That's what I thought." As he walked away, she felt something settle inside her. Not fear. Not despair. Decision. That night, after clocking out, she sat alone in her car and reviewed the day's recordings. She listened to his voice again, clear and unambiguous. She noted timestamps. Cross-checked them against her schedule. The picture was no longer incomplete. It was obvious. And still she waited. Because exposure without timing was just noise. And noise could be ignored. The manager continued as if untouchable. He joked with customers about lazy employees. He bragged to new hires about how he ran a tight ship. He dismissed complaints with practiced charm. The more confident he became, the more careless he grew. One afternoon, during a slow period, he complained loudly near the register about corporate audits. "They never come when it matters," he scoffed. "By the time anyone checks, everything's already fixed." Maya's phone caught every word. Another time he joked about payroll errors, calling them rounding issues. "Gotta keep costs down somehow," he said with a grin. Maya saved the file. By the end of the week, her phone held more than just insults. It held admissions, patterns, proof. Still, outwardly nothing changed. She smiled politely when spoken to. She nodded when corrected. She cleaned faster when told to. The manager mistook her compliance for submission. That was his greatest mistake. Because silence, when chosen deliberately, is not weakness. It is strategy. And Maya had already decided that when she finally spoke, it wouldn't be to argue. It would be to expose. The first sign that something was about to change came quietly. It wasn't a blow-up. It wasn't a confrontation. It was the way the manager stopped pretending. For weeks, Maya had watched his behavior sharpen and stretch, like someone testing the limits of a boundary they believed no longer existed. He no longer bothered masking his impatience around staff. He spoke openly about money in ways that made her pause. He complained about corporate oversight with a familiarity that suggested experience, not fear. And then one afternoon, during a lull so slow the air itself felt heavy, he made a mistake that would later be replayed over and over in her mind. Maya was restocking condiments near the service station when she heard his voice rise, not in anger but in confidence. He was talking to a new hire, a young man barely out of training who stood nodding nervously while pretending to listen. "You'll learn," the manager said casually. "Payroll's just numbers. You move them around enough, no one notices." Maya's hand froze mid-motion. The words weren't shouted. They weren't whispered either. They were said with the ease of someone explaining a basic truth, like gravity or taxes. Like something settled long ago. The phone in her apron pocket was already recording. The new hire laughed uncertainly. "Isn't that risky?" The manager waved it off. "Only if you're sloppy. Corporate doesn't audit stores like this unless someone makes noise. And even then," he shrugged. "By the time they show up, the numbers always look clean." Maya forced herself to keep moving, her heart suddenly hammering against her ribs. She reached for another bottle, another napkin holder, anything to keep her hands busy and her face neutral. This wasn't just abuse anymore. This was confession. Later that day, as the manager signed off on schedules, he called Maya over. "I need you to stay late tonight," he said. "We're short." She checked the clock. "I'm already scheduled until close." "Then stay after," he replied. Off the clock. Her pulse spiked. This wasn't new, but today it felt different. "I can't," she said quietly. The word landed heavier than she expected. The manager looked up slowly, his expression unreadable at first. Then his lips curled into a thin smile. "Can't," he repeated. "Or won't." "I can't," she said again more firmly. The air between them tightened. He straightened in his chair, folding his hands together. "You know," he said, "people who help out tend to get more hours. More flexibility." Maya met his eyes. "I understand." He studied her for a long moment as if seeing her clearly for the first time. Not the quiet waitress. Not the obedient worker. Something else. "Go home," he said finally. "We'll talk tomorrow." She nodded, turned, and walked away before her resolve could crack. That night, Maya didn't sleep. She sat at her small kitchen table with her laptop open, phone beside it, headphones in place. One by one, she listened to the recordings she'd collected over the past weeks. She categorized them. Named them. Matched timestamps to schedules, to tip reports, to pay stubs. The pattern was undeniable now. Tips skimmed. Hours altered. Off-the-clock labor normalized. And layered over all of it, a steady stream of intimidation designed to keep people silent. What frightened her wasn't the scale of it, it was how easily he spoke about it. How sure he was that nothing would ever come of it. By morning she had made a decision. She wouldn't confront him. She wouldn't warn him. She would let him hang himself with his own words. The next day she arrived early as usual. Tied her apron. Adjusted her phone. The manager greeted her with an exaggerated cheerfulness. "Morning," he said. "Feeling better?" "I'm fine," she replied. He nodded. "Good. We need team players." Throughout the shift, he hovered more than usual, his tone alternating between overly pleasant and sharply critical. It felt rehearsed, like he was testing different approaches to regain control. Midway through the afternoon, he cornered her near the supply closet. "I've been thinking," he said. "You've been here a while. Loyal. That counts for something." She waited. "There's opportunities for people like you," he continued. "If you show initiative." "What kind of initiative?" she asked. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Discretion." The word settled heavily between them. "I don't understand," she said. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Sure you do." Her phone captured everything. Later that week, the restaurant prepared for a surprise visit from a regional supervisor. The announcement sent a ripple of anxiety through the staff. The manager reacted with practiced calm. "Everyone relax," he said. "We'll be fine." Maya watched him carefully as he moved through the restaurant, issuing quiet instructions, adjusting schedules, pulling certain people aside. He asked her to swap shifts last minute. To leave early. To clock in later than usual. She refused when she could. Documented when she couldn't. The day of the visit arrived. The supervisor walked through with a clipboard and a polite smile, shaking hands, nodding approvingly. The manager played his role perfectly, professional, attentive, confident. When the supervisor asked about overtime, the manager laughed lightly. We run a tight ship. No overtime needed. Maya stood a few feet away refilling water glasses, her phone recording from its usual angle. After the supervisor left, the manager exhaled loudly. See, he said to no one in particular. Easy. That evening he grew careless. Flush with relief, he joked openly with another manager from a neighboring location who had stopped by. They stood near the bar area, voices low but clear. Payroll's a joke, he said. As long as you know where to shave, you're golden. The other manager laughed. You're bold? Bold, he replied, grinning. Not stupid. Maya's hands shook slightly as she wiped down the counter. She forced them steady. That was the moment she realized he didn't just think he was untouchable. He thought he was smart. The following days were a blur of tension and preparation. Maya backed up her recordings in multiple places. She wrote summaries. She cross-referenced policies, labor laws, and company guidelines. She didn't rush, because she knew what came next had to be precise. The manager, sensing something he couldn't quite name, began pressing harder. You've been quiet lately, he said one morning. Everything okay? Yes, she replied. He frowned. You sure? Yes. He didn't like that answer. He started assigning her the worst sections, cutting her hours unexpectedly, criticizing minor errors more harshly than ever. And then, one afternoon, he made the mistake that sealed everything. It happened during another lunch rush. The restaurant was packed, noise echoing off the walls. Maya moved quickly, efficiently, her focus sharp. The manager shouted across the floor. Clean that table faster. Heads turned. She continued working, not reacting. He stepped closer, his voice rising. I'm talking to you. She straightened slowly. I heard you. You don't get paid to think, he snapped. You get paid to do what you're told. Something in his tone shifted, less controlled, more exposed. The pressure of the weeks before pressing through his composure. And if you don't like it, he continued louder now, you know where the door is. Plenty of people who won't complain about a few adjustments to their hours. The words spilled out too easily. Adjustments. The phone in Maya's apron caught it all. The restaurant went quiet. Customers stared openly now. A fork clattered to the floor. The manager realized too late that he had said something he shouldn't have. His eyes flicked around the room, then back to Maya. Get back to work, he muttered, suddenly aware of himself. She did. But something had shifted irrevocably. That night, Maya sat alone again, reviewing the latest recording. His words were clear. His intent unmistakable. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She uploaded the file to the secure folder she had created weeks earlier, labeled carefully, methodically. The archive was complete. All that remained was timing. And for the first time since she had started recording, Maya knew exactly when she would speak. Maya did not sleep the night she decided to let the recordings leave her control. Not because she was afraid, she had moved past fear weeks ago, but because her mind refused to slow down. Every possible outcome played itself forward in her thoughts, branching into consequences she had rehearsed and contingencies she had already prepared for. She understood something most people didn't when they talked about exposure. Once evidence was released, it no longer belonged to the person who gathered it. It belonged to whoever found it useful. That was why she had waited. She sat at her kitchen table again, the same place where she had first listened to the recordings with shaking hands. The room was quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator. Her laptop screen glowed softly in the dark, folders neatly organized, files labeled with dates, times, and short descriptions. Nothing dramatic. Nothing emotional. Just facts. She opened one last document, a summary she had written herself. It wasn't long. It didn't accuse. It didn't exaggerate. It listed patterns. Wage discrepancies. Audio timestamps. Direct quotes. Company policy references. Labor code citations. It read like something written by someone who knew exactly what she was doing. Maya reread it twice, then once more. When she was satisfied, she attached it to an email drafted earlier that week. The recipient line held 3 addresses: corporate compliance, regional HR, and an external labor board hotline she had verified independently. She hovered over the send button longer than she expected. Not because she doubted the truth, but because she knew the moment she clicked it, there would be no going back. Silence had protected her until now. Visibility would not. Finally she clicked. The email sent quietly, without ceremony. No sound. No confirmation beyond a small line of text telling her the message had been delivered. She closed the laptop. The next morning she went to work. The manager greeted her as usual, clipboard under his arm, voice brisk. You're on section 3 today, he said. Don't fall behind. She nodded. Okay. Nothing had changed yet. And that, she knew, was exactly how it would start. Institutions moved slowly. Paperwork took time. Verification required review. The absence of immediate consequences was not failure, it was procedure. By the second day, subtle changes began. The manager received more phone calls than usual. He stepped outside to take them, lowering his voice. He spent longer in the office, door closed. When he came back onto the floor, his smile looked forced, stretched thin. Maya noticed, but she didn't react. On the third day, a notice appeared in the staff scheduling system announcing an unexpected review. No details. No explanation. Just a time window and a reminder about cooperation. The manager laughed it off in front of staff. Routine, he said. Happens all the time. But his hands shook slightly as he folded the printed notice. By the end of the week, two people Maya had never seen before walked into the restaurant during the afternoon lull. They wore business casual clothing and neutral expressions, introducing themselves quietly to the manager near the register. Maya watched from her section as his posture stiffened. He nodded too quickly, smiled too wide. They asked to speak in the office. The door closed. The restaurant felt different immediately. Quieter. Tighter. Staff exchanged glances they quickly looked away from. No one said anything. After 20 minutes, the door opened. The manager emerged, face flushed, jaw clenched. The two visitors remained behind, speaking in low tones. He returned to the floor and clapped his hands together. All right, he said too loudly. Let's keep things moving. Maya's phone recorded the tremor in his voice. That night, she received her first response. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't threatening. It was professional and carefully worded, thanking her for bringing concerns forward and confirming receipt of her materials. They requested additional documentation if available and assured her that retaliation was prohibited. She read it once and archived it. The next shift, the manager didn't speak to her at all. Not once. He corrected other staff. He chatted with customers. He avoided her section entirely. For the first time since she'd started working there, Maya felt invisible in a different way. And then, unexpectedly, the story stopped being private. The footage did not surface online the way viral videos usually did, explosively, chaotically, without context. Instead, it appeared first where it mattered most. Internal. A coworker pulled her aside near the soda machine, eyes wide. Did you hear? She whispered. Maya shook her head. Hear what? They're investigating him, the woman said. Like, seriously? Payroll. Tips. Everything. Maya nodded slowly. Okay. The coworker stared at her, searching her face. Do you know anything about that? No, Maya replied calmly. The woman hesitated, then leaned closer. Someone sent recordings. A lot of them. Maya felt her pulse quicken, but she kept her expression neutral. That sounds serious. It is, the woman said. They played one of them for the assistant manager. You can hear his voice clear as day. Maya folded napkins carefully, one corner at a time. What did he say? The woman swallowed. Things he shouldn't have. By the following Monday, the manager was called into the office before opening. This time the door stayed closed for over an hour. When he came out, his face was pale. He didn't look at Maya. An announcement followed shortly after. The manager would be temporarily stepping away, while the company conducted a review. The assistant manager would oversee operations in the meantime. No one clapped. No one cheered. The staff stood silently, absorbing the information. The manager gathered his belongings under supervision. Clipboard, jacket, coffee mug. He avoided eye contact, shoulders hunched, the confidence that once radiated from him reduced to something brittle and fragile. As he passed Maya's section, he stopped briefly. For a moment she thought he might speak. He didn't. He turned away and walked out the door. The restaurant breathed out collectively. In the days that followed, the investigation widened. Payroll records were requested. Tip distributions reviewed. Schedules scrutinized. Former employees contacted. Maya was interviewed twice. Both times she answered questions calmly, precisely, sticking to facts. She did not editorialize. She did not gloat. She let the evidence speak. Word began to spread beyond the restaurant. Not loudly. Not yet. But enough that people noticed. A former employee messaged her on social media, asking if it was true. She didn't respond. Then, unexpectedly, the footage surfaced publicly. Not all of it. Just one clip. A short segment. The moment he said, "Clean faster," followed by, "You don't get paid to think." It appeared online without commentary, posted anonymously. No names. No context. Just the raw audio and video. Within hours, it spread. Comments poured in from strangers who recognized the tone instantly. People who had heard those words before in different places from different mouths. The outrage wasn't about the manager, it was about the familiarity. Maya watched the reactions quietly from a distance. She didn't share the video. She didn't comment. She didn't like or repost. She went to work. The restaurant filled with whispers. Customers recognized her. Some looked at her with sympathy. Others with curiosity. The assistant manager pulled her aside one afternoon. "I just want you to know," she said, voice low, "things are going to change around here." Maya nodded. "Okay." Also, the woman added, hesitating, if you need anything, support, time off. I'm fine, Maya said. And she meant it. Because the footage was no longer hers. The manager's name surfaced soon after. Not through gossip but through official channels. Articles appeared referencing an internal investigation into labor violations at a local restaurant. No sensational headlines. Just facts. But facts, when left alone, had a way of spreading. The manager issued a statement through a representative, denying wrongdoing, blaming misunderstandings. He did not address the recordings directly. The response did not land the way he hoped. Former employees came forward. Stories aligned. Patterns repeated. What had once been isolated incidents became evidence of something larger. Maya remained quiet. She watched as the narrative shifted from a single confrontation to a system that had allowed it to happen. She listened as commentators debated accountability, oversight, and silence. And through it all, she continued working her shifts, cleaning tables with the same care, the same steady hands. One afternoon, as she wiped down the same booth where it had all started, she paused. The table was clean. The room calm. No one barked orders. No one hovered. The silence felt different now, not heavy, not oppressive, but open. The footage had done what words never could. It had moved the truth beyond her voice. And there was still more to come. The first thing to disappear was certainty. For years, the manager had moved through the restaurant with the unshakable confidence of someone who believed the system existed to protect him. Rules bent around him. Complaints evaporated. People came and went while he remained, immovable and self-assured. Even when the footage surfaced, even when the investigation began, he told himself it would pass. Everything always did. But certainty does not survive scrutiny. The corporate inquiry accelerated with a quiet efficiency that felt almost surgical. Requests arrived daily, timekeeping logs, tip distribution records, scheduling changes, archived emails. The assistant manager spent hours photocopying documents, answering questions she had never been asked before. Each response generated another request. Each clarification opened another door. The restaurant, once a place of routine, became a place of review. Maya felt the shift immediately. Policies that had been ignored were suddenly quoted verbatim. Breaks were enforced. Overtime was logged properly. Tip jars were sealed and counted with witnesses present. The changes were subtle, but they were unmistakable. It wasn't kindness. It was fear. The manager, now officially on leave, attempted to regain control from a distance. Emails arrived insisting on misunderstandings. Text messages were sent to former co-workers asking for statements. A carefully worded letter from his attorney circulated internally, emphasizing his years of service and denying intentional wrongdoing. Maya read none of it directly. She heard about it through fragments, whispers in the break room, tense conversations cut short when she entered. She remained exactly where she had always been. On the floor. Working. Quiet. That silence unsettled people more than anger ever could. The investigation widened beyond the restaurant within days. Payroll irregularities raised flags at neighboring locations. Former employees from other branches came forward with similar experiences. Patterns aligned across districts. What had been framed as a single incident became a systemic problem. The company's tone shifted publicly. Statements were released acknowledging concerns and promising corrective action. Training programs were announced. Hotlines were reiterated. Apologies were issued in language carefully vetted by legal teams. Behind closed doors, accountability sharpened. The manager was summoned to a formal hearing. He arrived early, dressed meticulously, clutching a folder filled with prepared defenses. He spoke confidently at first, dismissing recordings as out of context, insisting his comments were misinterpreted, framed unfairly by an employee with grievances. But evidence does not argue. It accumulates. Recording after recording played. Each one alone might have been explained away. Together, they formed a voice pattern impossible to deny. His own words echoed back to him, unfiltered, unedited, unmistakable. Adjustments. Discretion. Replaceable. The room grew quieter with each clip. When payroll discrepancies were presented alongside audio timestamps, his explanations faltered. When former employees corroborated the practices, his certainty cracked. By the end of the session, he was no longer speaking. He was listening. And for the first time in a long time, he was being evaluated rather than obeyed. Maya was not present. She was not asked to attend. Her role was complete. Days later, the outcome reached the restaurant quietly without announcement. The manager's position was terminated. His access revoked. His record flagged for further review by external agencies. The assistant manager gathered the staff together after closing. She spoke carefully, reading from a prepared statement that emphasized change, accountability, and commitment to a respectful workplace. No names were mentioned. But everyone understood. Afterward, the staff lingered longer than usual, talking in low voices, sharing stories that had once been swallowed. For some, relief mingled with anger. For others, disbelief lingered. Maya listened. She did not center herself. She did not correct narratives. She allowed others their moment, understanding that healing required space. Outside the restaurant, the story continued to ripple. Labor advocates referenced the case in discussions about wage theft and workplace intimidation. Articles updated their language, shifting from alleged misconduct to confirmed violations. The footage, once a single clip, became emblematic of something broader. The manager released a final statement through his attorney, maintaining innocence while acknowledging mistakes in communication. It landed with a dull thud. No one was listening anymore. Maya felt the impact of the fallout in quieter ways. Her next paycheck reflected corrected hours. Back pay arrived without explanation. An email confirmed reimbursement for withheld tips, calculated precisely. She read it once and closed it. At work, the atmosphere changed. Not overnight, not perfectly, but tangibly. Managers asked instead of barked. Corrections were delivered privately. Staff meetings included actual listening. Maya's co-workers treated her differently too. With respect, sometimes with awe, sometimes with awkwardness. "You're brave," one said softly. Maya shook her head. "I just paid attention." Another asked how she did it, how she stayed calm, how she didn't break. Maya didn't answer directly. She didn't want to become a symbol. Symbols invited projection. Projection distorted truth. She wasn't brave. She had been tired. And she had chosen a method that matched her nature. As the weeks passed, external consequences deepened. Regulatory bodies requested interviews. Additional reviews uncovered discrepancies that extended beyond the manager's tenure. Corporate restructuring followed. New oversight protocols were implemented. The company made an example, not of Maya but of the system that had failed. And still she worked her shifts. One afternoon, during a particularly quiet moment, a customer approached her table with a gentle smile. "I saw the video," the woman said softly. "I just wanted to say, thank you." Maya paused then nodded. "You're welcome." The woman hesitated. That must have been hard. Maya considered this. It was necessary. The woman left a generous tip. That night, as Maya walked to her car, she noticed something she hadn't felt in months. Lightness. Not joy. Not triumph. Relief. The kind that comes when a weight you've been carrying quietly is finally set down. But the story was not over yet. Because consequences, when real, never stop at one door. And the system, now exposed, was still adjusting to the truth Maya had forced it to face, without ever raising her voice. When the noise finally faded, Maya noticed it in the smallest ways. It was in the way the restaurant sounded different now. Not quieter exactly but calmer. Voices no longer carried the same edge. Footsteps no longer hurried with fear. Orders were still called out, plates still clattered, customers still complained, but the underlying tension that had once lived in the walls was gone. For the first time since she had started working there, Maya felt like she could breathe while doing her job. The weeks after the manager's termination passed without drama. That, in itself, felt strange. There were no confrontations, no grand speeches, no cinematic apologies. Just changes. Policies followed. Schedules posted on time. Hours respected. Corrections delivered without humiliation. At first, Maya waited for the other shoe to drop. She had lived too long under unpredictable authority to trust stability easily. Every calm moment felt temporary, like the eye of a storm that might still return. She caught herself flinching when a supervisor raised their voice across the room, only to realize they were laughing with a customer. She checked her phone instinctively, even when there was nothing new to record. Old habits did not disappear overnight. But days turned into weeks and the calm held. The assistant manager, now officially promoted, ran the floor with a different presence. Not perfect, not overly gentle, but deliberate. She asked questions. She explained decisions. She listened. One afternoon she pulled Maya aside. "I wanted to thank you," she said quietly. "Not just for what you did, but for how you did it." Maya shrugged slightly. "I didn't do much." The manager shook her head. "You did everything." Maya didn't respond. Praise made her uncomfortable. It always had. She wasn't sure where to put it, how to carry it without letting it change her. What mattered more was what happened next. The company offered Maya options. Not immediately. Not as a reward. But eventually, once the dust settled and the investigations concluded. An email arrived asking if she would be open to a transfer, if she wanted more consistent hours, if she was interested in training for a supervisory role. Maya read the message carefully. She didn't answer right away. For years, her life had been shaped by reaction, responding to demands, absorbing pressure, adjusting to survive. Now, for the first time, she was being asked to choose. That kind of freedom felt heavier than obligation. Outside of work, her world shifted too. Friends who had once listened patiently to her exhaustion now looked at her with something like reverence. Some asked for advice about their own jobs. Others simply wanted to talk as if proximity to what she had done made them feel braver. Maya listened, but she was careful. She knew how easily stories could simplify what had been complex. How people wanted heroes and villains, clean arcs and satisfying endings. But real life didn't work that way. She wasn't a hero. And the manager hadn't been a cartoon villain. He had been something more dangerous. He had been ordinary. That realization stayed with her. In quiet moments, walking home, washing dishes, lying awake at night, Maya thought about how easily it could have gone differently. How many people before her had endured the same treatment and walked away with nothing but bitterness? How many had stayed silent because they had families to feed, debts to pay, fear to manage? She didn't judge them. She understood them. She also understood now that what she had done wasn't about courage. It was about alignment. She had aligned her response with her nature. She had chosen patience over confrontation, evidence over argument. That was why it worked. The story continued to unfold beyond her immediate circle. Regulatory agencies finalized their findings. Fines were issued. Compliance plans mandated. Training programs expanded. The company publicly committed to reforms that would have seemed unthinkable months earlier. Other employees, at other locations, began to come forward. Some anonymously. Some openly. The hotline that had once felt useless now rang constantly. Maya watched from a distance, both proud and uneasy. She hadn't intended to start something larger. She had only wanted the behavior to stop. But once truth escaped containment, it moved on its own. The footage that had gone viral slowly faded from public conversation, replaced by new stories, new outrages. That too was expected. The internet never lingered long. What remained were the changes that didn't trend. Maya's paycheck stabilized. Her schedule became predictable. Her days stopped being defined by anticipation of humiliation. She noticed how that affected her body. Her shoulders loosened. The tightness in her chest eased. She slept better. Ate better. Laughed more easily. Small things. But small things were everything. One evening, after a long but manageable shift, she stayed behind to help a newer employee finish closing. The girl moved nervously, glancing around as if expecting someone to shout. "You don't have to rush," Maya said gently. The girl looked at her, surprised. "I don't." "No," Maya replied. "Take your time. It's okay." The girl exhaled, shoulders dropping. In that moment, Maya saw herself months earlier. And she understood something she hadn't before. Change didn't always announce itself. Sometimes it whispered. As the seasons shifted, Maya made a decision about the company's offer. She declined the supervisory role. Not because she couldn't do it, but because she didn't want to. Leadership, she realized, didn't require a title. She had already led in her own way without authority or recognition. She didn't need to replicate the structure that had failed her. Instead, she accepted a transfer to a quieter location closer to home, with consistent hours and a smaller staff. A fresh start on her terms. On her last day at the original restaurant, her coworkers surprised her with a small gathering after closing. Nothing elaborate. Just pizza, laughter, shared stories. Someone made a toast. "To Maya," they said. "For reminding us that silence doesn't mean consent." Maya felt her throat tighten. She managed to smile. "We all did this," she said. And she meant it. When she walked out that night, keys in hand, she paused at the door. The same door she had passed through countless times under the weight of expectation and fear. It felt lighter now. The new restaurant was different. Smaller. Slower. The staff younger, less worn. The manager respectful, occasionally awkward, clearly trying. Maya settled in easily. She kept her phone in her apron out of habit, but she never recorded anything. There was nothing to capture. Sometimes that felt strange. She realized how much vigilance had become part of her identity. How alertness had shaped her days. Letting go of that felt like learning to unclench muscles she hadn't known were tight. One afternoon, during a quiet break, a coworker asked her casually, "Have you ever dealt with a really bad boss?" Maya smiled faintly. "Yes." "What did you do?" the coworker asked. Maya considered her answer carefully. "I paid attention," she said. "And I didn't rush." The coworker nodded, not fully understanding, but maybe one day she would. Months later, Maya received an email from a former coworker. The manager, her former manager, had attempted to contest the findings, but the appeal had been denied. His name appeared briefly in a trade publication, attached to a cautionary note about labor compliance failures. Maya read the article once. She felt no satisfaction. Only closure. She closed the tab and went back to her day. The truth, she realized, was that she had never wanted revenge. She had wanted balance. Accountability. An end to a pattern that thrived on invisibility. And she had achieved that, not through volume but through clarity. In the evenings when she walked home from work, Maya noticed how the city felt different too. Or maybe it was just her. She paid attention to small things. The way light hit storefront windows, the rhythm of footsteps on the sidewalk, the murmur of conversations passing by. She was present in a way she hadn't been before. The past still existed. It always would. But it no longer defined her. She had moved through something difficult without losing herself. And that, she understood now, was the real victory. Time did not stop for Maya after everything settled. That was the strange part. After the investigations concluded, after the statements were issued, after the manager's name faded from headlines and internal memos, life did not pause to acknowledge the weight of what had happened. There was no ceremony for endurance. No marker for quiet victories. Days continued, ordinary and unremarkable, and Maya moved through them like anyone else. But something fundamental had shifted, not just in her life but in the lives of people who would never know her name. She began to understand this gradually, in fragments, through moments that seemed insignificant on the surface. It was in the way a young server corrected a supervisor without flinching. In the way tip jars were counted openly without tension. In the way people now said, "That's not okay," when something felt wrong. The system had not become perfect. It never would. But it had become alert. And alert systems behave differently. Maya did not speak publicly about what she had done. She declined interview requests that came through intermediaries. She ignored emails asking her to share her story. She did not want ownership of something that, to her, had never been about storytelling. She had not exposed the manager to be seen. She had exposed him so others would no longer be unseen. As months passed, the restaurant industry continued the way it always had, fast, unforgiving, hungry for labor. But within that grind, small fractures appeared where silence used to be absolute. People documented more. Trusted less blindly. Maya saw it when former co-workers messaged her, not to praise but to say things like, "I spoke up today," or "I started writing things down," or "I didn't let it slide this time." Those messages mattered more than any headline ever could. She saved none of them. She didn't need proof anymore. The new restaurant where she worked never knew the full story. To them she was simply reliable. Quiet. Observant. The kind of coworker who noticed when someone was struggling before they said anything. She trained new hires patiently, teaching them systems and habits but also something else, something harder to articulate. She taught them that dignity was not something a manager granted. It was something you carried. Sometimes late at night, Maya thought about the manager, not with anger but with a distant curiosity. She wondered if he understood what had undone him. Whether he believed he had been unlucky or targeted or betrayed. She doubted he ever truly grasped it. People like him rarely did. They believed power was loud because they had never been forced to listen. Maya understood something he never had. That power does not always announce itself. Sometimes it observes. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it records. And when it finally moves, it does so without asking permission. There was one moment, nearly a year later, that brought everything into sharp focus. Maya was standing in line at a grocery store when she overheard a conversation behind her. A woman was complaining quietly to a friend about her job, about a supervisor who talked down to her, about shifts changed without notice, about being told she was lucky to be there. Her voice wavered with a familiar mixture of frustration and doubt. "I don't want to make trouble," the woman said. I don't know if it's worth it." Maya turned around gently. "I'm sorry," she said. "I couldn't help overhearing. But it is worth it." The woman looked surprised. "What is?" "Paying attention," Maya replied. "Even if you don't act right away." The woman hesitated. "Have you dealt with something like that?" Maya nodded. "Yes." "What happened?" the woman asked. Maya considered her words carefully. She did not want to give a speech. She did not want to turn herself into an example. So she told the truth. "I stayed quiet," she said. "But I didn't stay blind." The woman absorbed this silently. They parted ways without exchanging names. Maya never saw her again. But she knew something important had happened in that brief exchange. Knowledge had passed hands. That was how real change traveled. Not in movements or slogans, but in moments where someone realized they were not alone, and never had been. Years from now, Maya knew the footage would mean very little. Technology moved on. Platforms disappeared. Files corrupted. Attention shifted. But the lesson embedded in it would outlast the medium. That lesson was simple. Silence is not consent. Quiet is not weakness. And compliance does not equal agreement. Maya lived her life guided by that understanding now. She took up space when necessary. She withdrew when it suited her. She trusted herself to know the difference. On the anniversary of the day everything began, the day the manager barked, "Clean faster," Maya did not mark the occasion. She worked a normal shift, went home, cooked dinner, and slept soundly. She did not need reminders. Her life itself was proof. Proof that you did not have to shout to be heard. Proof that you did not have to rage to be effective. Proof that you did not have to destroy yourself to stop someone else from doing harm. She had won without becoming like him. And that, in the end, was what made her victory permanent. Because systems can recover from scandal. Reputations can be rebuilt. But authority loses something forever the moment it is exposed by someone it believed incapable of resistance. Maya had not just exposed a secret. She had exposed an assumption. And assumptions, once broken, never fully return. That was her legacy. Not a viral clip. Not a courtroom moment. Not a triumphant confrontation, but a quiet truth that traveled farther than any voice ever could.